The Hangang River smelled like winter and diesel that night, and Amara Whitfield stood at the edge of the observation deck with her ex-husband's voice still ringing in her ears like a slap that wouldn't stop echoing. "You're nobody without me." Darius had said it 3 hours ago in the lobby of the Seoul Hotel, in front of 42 people, in front of the woman he was already sleeping with, in front of the concierge who pretended to be studying his monitor. "You're a black girl from Baltimore who got lucky. That's it. That's the whole story." She had $147 in her checking account, a duffel bag at her feet, a one-way flight home that boarded at 6:14 the next morning from Incheon. And she had spent the last 48 minutes staring at the black water below, not because she wanted to jump, but because she was trying to figure out how a 31-year-old woman with a master's degree from Georgetown and 6 years of marriage to a Fortune 500 executive had ended up with less money than a college freshman. The wind cut through her coat. She hadn't cried yet. That was the strange part. She kept waiting for the tears, and they kept refusing to arrive, like her body already knew something her mind hadn't caught up to. That was when the black Maybach pulled up behind her. She heard it before she saw it. The particular hush of an engine that costs more than most houses. The soft double click of a door. And then footsteps on the frost-slicked pavement, unhurried, the way a man walks when he has never in his life had to prove he belonged somewhere. "Ms. Whitfield?" His voice was low and flat and Korean accented, and she turned before she remembered she probably shouldn't. He was tall, that was the first thing. 6'2", maybe 6'3", in a charcoal overcoat that fit him the way expensive things fit men who don't think about clothes. Late 30s. A face that looked like it had been carved rather than born. Sharp jaw, sharp cheekbones, eyes so dark they read as black under the sodium lights. There was a thin scar running from his left temple down into the hairline behind his ear, so faint you'd miss it if you weren't standing 3 feet away. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't threatening. He was just there, the way a mountain is there. "You don't know me," he said. "My name is Yoon Seo-jin. I own the building your husband works in. I own several buildings your husband works in. And in about 11 hours, I'm going to destroy him. I would prefer to do it with your cooperation, but I will do it either way." Amara stared at him. "I don't understand," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "You will." He gestured once toward the Maybach. "There is coffee in the car, and heat, and no obligation. Whatever you decide warm. Please." She should have said no. Every reasonable instinct in her body, the ones her mother had drilled into her since she was 6 years old, the ones that had kept her alive on the number 7 bus at midnight in West Baltimore, every single one of them said, "Get on the plane, go home, start over." Instead, she picked up her duffel bag and walked to the car. But to understand how Amara Whitfield ended up in the back of a Korean crime boss's Maybach at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in Seoul, we need to go back. This story is for the woman who has been called nobody by the person who was supposed to know her best, for the woman who signed the prenup because she was in love, and now the prenup is the reason she's afraid to leave, for the woman who put her career on pause for his career, her dreams on pause for his dreams, her whole entire self on pause for a life that turned out to be a waiting room, for the woman who moved across an ocean for a man and forgot to pack a return ticket for herself. If any part of that just landed in your chest, I want you to do something for me before we go any further. I want you to hit that subscribe button, because what happens next in Amara's story is the thing nobody tells you about starting over. It doesn't start with a plan. It starts with a stranger at a river who tells you the truth you already suspected. And I want you to drop a comment right now with one word. Just one. The word for what you had to survive. Not the whole story. Not the explanation. Just the one word. Because somebody scrolling past this video tonight needs to know they're not the only one. Here's the thematic question I want you to hold in your hands while we walk through this together. When someone spends years telling you you're nothing, and then one day a stranger looks at you and treats you like you're everything, how do you know which one is telling the truth? Amara didn't know yet. She was about to find out. And the answer wasn't the one she expected. Amara Denise Whitfield grew up in a row house on North Fulton Avenue in Baltimore, the daughter of a postal worker named Denise and a jazz trumpeter named Wallace, who died of a heart attack when she was 9. Her mother raised her on double shifts, coupons cut on Sunday afternoons, and one non-negotiable rule: you will finish your education, and you will finish it debt-free. Denise Whitfield worked 41 years at the Baltimore post office. She retired with a pension that would have embarrassed a mid-level manager. She sent Amara to Morgan State on scholarship, and then to Georgetown for a master's in international business, and she never once complained about the winters she spent in a coat 2 sizes too thin, because the good coat had gone to her daughter. Amara met Darius Prescott at a Kappa Alpha Psi mixer during her 2nd year at Georgetown. He was 26, already working at a corporate strategy firm, already wearing shoes that cost more than her rent. He was tall and light-skinned, and had that particular kind of Howard graduate confidence that made a room bend toward him. He told her on their 3rd date that she was the smartest woman he had ever met. He told her on their 8th date that he was going to marry her. He told her 6 months later that he had been offered a position at LG's international division in Seoul, and he wanted her to come with him, as his wife. She was 25. Her mother said, "Baby, are you sure?" Denise said it 3 times, at 3 different volumes, over 3 different phone calls, and Amara mistook her mother's caution for her mother's fear of losing her. That was the first mistake. The prenup was the second. Darius's family lawyer, a man named Kwan, who had known the Prescotts since Darius was in middle school, walked her through 14 pages of legal language in a conference room in Bethesda. She signed it without reading it carefully because she was embarrassed to slow the process down. She was embarrassed that her side of the table was empty. She was embarrassed that her mother had offered to bring her own cousin who did family law in Prince George's County, and Amara had said no, because she didn't want Darius's family to think her family was tacky. That was the day she started disappearing. She just didn't know it yet. They moved to Seoul in the spring of her 26th year. Darius's company put them in a 3-bedroom apartment in Hanam-dong, the neighborhood where every embassy and every chaebol heir seems to keep at least one door. Amara had a job lined up. She had done the work, she had the credentials. She had 2 offers on the table from consulting firms in Gangnam, and Darius told her 3 weeks after they arrived that it would look bad if his wife worked her first year in country. "Optics," he said. "Give me 1 year. Let me establish myself. Then you can do whatever you want." 1 year became 2. 2 became 4. By year 5, she was hosting dinners for his colleagues in a language she had taught herself from a workbook, laughing at jokes she hadn't been included in the setup for, and applying every 6 months to jobs she was overqualified for, while Darius told her the market was tight, the timing was bad, maybe next quarter. She started keeping a spreadsheet, not of money, of compliments. Every time he said something kind to her, she wrote it down, with the date. It was the kind of thing you do when you're trying to prove to yourself that a thing exists. In the last 18 months of the marriage, the spreadsheet had 4 entries. She found the first text from the other woman in October of her 31st year. The woman's name was Chaewon, and she was a junior analyst at Darius's firm, and the text said, in English, "Are you going to tell her this weekend, or should I?" Amara didn't scream. She didn't throw the phone. She walked into the bathroom, closed the door, and sat on the tile floor for 1 hour and 47 minutes, and when she came out, she said nothing. She spent the next 4 months collecting bank statements, credit card statements, screenshots. Not because she was planning to fight. She didn't yet know she was allowed to fight. But because some old, careful part of her, the part her mother had put there, said document everything. On the Tuesday, she was standing at the hangang. She had walked into the Sineal to sign the divorce papers Darius's lawyer had drafted. The papers said she would leave Korea with what she had brought, her clothes, her books. A savings account that she now knew, because she had finally read the prenup carefully, contained $147, because everything else had been in accounts titled to Darius's holding company, which she had signed away access to on page 11, paragraph 3. He had laughed when she asked about her mother's medical bills. He had actually laughed in the lobby, in front of Chaewon, in front of the concierge, and said the sentence that would follow her onto the observation deck and into the black Maybach and into the rest of her life. You're nobody without me." She had walked out of the Signal with her duffel bag, and no plan and no coat warm enough for the wind coming off the river, and she had gone to the water because the water was the only place in Seoul that hadn't been paid for by her husband. That was when Yoon Seo-jin's Maybach pulled up, and that was when everything Amara thought she knew about her own life turned out to be the smaller, quieter version of the truth. The inside of the Maybach smelled like leather, and something faintly herbal, like the tea her grandmother used to drink. There was, as promised, coffee, a small ceramic cup on a warmed console, the steam curling in the soft amber light. Seo-jin sat across from her, one leg crossed over the other, hands folded in his lap. "Drink," he said. "You are cold. It is difficult to hear difficult things when you are cold." Amara wrapped her hands around the cup. She let the heat travel up her wrists. She did not drink yet. "You said you own the buildings my husband works in," she said. "You said you're going to destroy him. I want to know why you know my name." Seo-jin studied her for a moment. His eyes up close weren't black. They were a very dark brown with something copper flickering behind them, the way old wood looks under lamplight. "9 years ago," he said, "my younger sister was engaged to a Korean-American man named Prescott, Darius Prescott." Amara's hand tightened on the cup. "Her name was Yoon Hannah. She was 24. She was a resident at Severance Hospital in pediatric oncology. She met your husband at a wedding in Los Angeles the summer before he was recruited by LG. They were engaged for 11 months. He paused. His voice did not change. He broke it off by email, 2 weeks before the wedding. He kept the ring, which had belonged to my grandmother. He kept the down payment on the apartment my father had helped them place. And he kept a photograph of my sister, which he later used, along with 14 other photographs of women he had been involved with, in a private album he circulated among certain associates in Seoul, as, I believe the phrase was, a portfolio." Amara felt something cold spread from her sternum outward. "My sister," Seo-jin said, "took her own life on the 7th of April, 9 years ago. She was 25. The car was silent. Somewhere outside, a barge horn sounded, low and long over the river. "I'm sorry," Amara said, and she meant it, and she knew it wasn't enough. "I did not tell you this to make you sorry." Seo-jin's voice was still level, but something had entered it, something older than grief. "I told you this because for 9 years I have been buying the ground under your husband's feet. His firm, the building his firm rents, the bank that finances his firm's operations in the region, his car lease. The private club he pretends is his. His mistress's family owns a small logistics company in Busan. I own that too, as of last November. He does not know any of this. He believes he is a man of means in a foreign country. He is, in fact, standing on my property, breathing air I have priced." Amara looked at him, really looked at him. She had spent 5 years being married to a man who lied about the weather. She had developed, without meaning to, an ear for the truth. He was telling the truth. "Why now?" she asked. "Because 2 weeks ago," Seo-jin said, "his firm submitted a proposal to acquire a minority stake in one of my holdings. The proposal came across my desk. I saw his signature, and I understood that he had spent 9 years climbing a ladder I had been holding, and he was about to reach for the top rung." He leaned forward, just slightly. "I was going to end him regardless, Miss Whitfield. That was going to happen on Thursday morning, at 9 a.m., in a conference room in Uido. What I did not know, until my head of research briefed me 48 hours ago, was that he had a wife, that his wife was an American woman with a graduate degree who had not been employed in 6 years, that his wife had been described in his firm's internal HR notes, yes, we have those, as, I quote, a domestic asset, unlikely to complicate exit." Amara's breath caught. "A domestic asset," she repeated. "He filed those notes 8 months ago." Seo-jin's jaw moved once. "He has been planning to leave you for the better part of a year. The divorce papers he asked you to sign tonight are not standard. They are constructed to ensure that when I move on him Thursday morning, you will have no legal standing, no assets, and no ability to testify. He was trying to make you disappear before I made him disappear." She set the coffee cup down. Her hand was steady. That surprised her. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I want," Seo-jin said, "to give you 3 things. A lawyer, the best in Seoul, retained on my account, with no obligation to me. A room, in a hotel I own, for as long as you need it, in your name, paid in advance. And a choice." "What choice?" "Whether you would like to be present," he said, "when your husband learns what he has actually built his life on." Amara looked out the window. Seoul slid past in ribbons of light, the neon of a convenience store, the red cross of a small church, a woman on a scooter carrying a stack of pizza boxes taller than her helmet. She thought about her mother. She thought about the $147. She thought about the phrase domestic asset. "I need to think," she said. "Take the night." Seo-jin nodded once. "The room is booked. The lawyer will be available at 8 a.m. Thursday is Thursday, whether you are in the room or not." The car glided south toward the Han, and Amara Whitfield, for the first time in 6 years, felt something that was not quite hope, but was at least its cousin. The sharp, clean sensation of being seen by someone who had done the work of looking. The hotel was called the Hanwoo, and it occupied the top 19 floors of a tower in Cheongdam that Amara had walked past 100 times without ever entering. The room they gave her was on the 42nd floor. It had a bathtub the size of her mother's kitchen, and a window that looked out over a city she had lived in for 6 years and never once felt she belonged to. She slept for 4 hours. She woke at 5:12 a.m. and could not go back to sleep. At 7:30 she went downstairs. There was a private breakfast room, and in it was a woman in a cream suit and low heels, who stood up when Amara entered and introduced herself as Park Ji-woo, senior partner at Park Lim and Associates. "Ms. Whitfield," Ji-woo said. Her English was clean and precise. "Before we begin, I want to be clear about something. Mr. Yoon has paid my firm to make myself available to you. He has not instructed me on strategy. He has not asked to be updated. If you decide after this conversation that you would prefer a different attorney, I will help you find one. My loyalty in this matter is to you." Amara sat down. She poured coffee. She said, "Show me what I signed." Ji-woo opened a black folder. For the next 2 hours, Amara learned that the marriage she had been living inside was, from a legal standpoint, an architecture designed to make her invisible. The prenup she had signed at 25 contained a clause, paragraph 14(b), which she had read but had not understood, that assigned all marital appreciation to a Delaware LLC in Darius's name. Every raise, every bonus, every real estate acquisition, every stock grant, all of it had been legally routed into a structure she had no access to and no ownership of. The apartment in Hanam-dong was not theirs. It was leased in the name of the LLC. The furniture had been purchased through a corporate account. Even her clothes, most of them, had been bought on cards that traced back to Darius's holding company. "On paper," Ji-woo said gently, "you own 3 suitcases and $147. "I know," Amara said. "On paper," Ji-woo continued, "you are also potentially liable for approximately $280,000 in unreported gift tax because your husband has been running personal expenses through his LLC and characterizing them as spousal gifts to avoid corporate income treatment. If the Korean tax authority audits him, and Mr. Yoon has indicated that on Thursday morning they will, you are the co-signatory on 11 of those filings." Amara felt the room tilt very slightly. "He was going to leave me holding the tax bill." "He was going to leave you holding everything," Ji-woo said. "That is what the divorce papers you were asked to sign last night were designed to finalize. Under those terms, you would have waived any claim to marital assets in exchange for what he called a goodwill payment of $15,000. You would also have accepted, in paragraph 9, sole responsibility for any tax irregularities in the joint filings you signed during the marriage. He was going to fly you home to Baltimore with $15,000 and a $280,000 tax problem waiting for you on U.S. soil." Amara sat very still. She thought about her mother, 68 years old, on a fixed pension in a row house on North Fulton Avenue. She thought about the medical bills, her mother's diabetes management, the eye surgery she had put off for 2 years. She thought about the phone call she had almost made from the observation deck the night before, the one where she was going to tell her mother she was coming home, and how relieved she had been that she hadn't made it, because there was no version of that call that didn't put a new weight on a woman who had already carried too much. She thought about the phrase domestic asset, and she felt something in her chest that she had not felt in a very long time. It was not sadness. It was not fear. It was rage, cold, clean, useful rage, the kind of rage that had a spine. "Ms. Park," she said, "what are my options?" Ji-woo smiled, very small. It was the smile of a professional who had been waiting for exactly that question. "You have 3, she said. "Option 1, you sign what he wants you to sign, you get on the plane, and you spend the next 4 to 6 years fighting the IRS from Baltimore. I do not recommend this. Option 2, you refuse to sign. You file for divorce here in Seoul, under Korean jurisdiction, on grounds of adultery, which is no longer criminal here but is still highly relevant in asset division, and you request a full forensic accounting of the marital LLC. This will take 18 months. It will be ugly. It will succeed. You will likely recover between $4 and $7 million, depending on how aggressively the court treats the offshore structures." Amara blinked. $7 million. "Your husband," Ji-woo said, "is worth considerably more than he has led you to believe. The LLC has been very profitable. It has also been very fraudulent, which is convenient for us. Option 3. Option 3, Ji-woo said, is that you do all of that, and you also cooperate with the criminal investigation the National Tax Service is about to open on Thursday morning. Cooperation as a spouse who was deceived carries specific protections under Korean tax law. It also, quite frankly, ends his career and his ability to work in this country ever again." Amara looked at the woman across the table. "I want option 3, she said, "but I want to add something." "Yes?" "I want to be in the room," Amara said, "when he finds out." Yoon Seo-jin's office was on the 59th floor of a building in Junggu that did not have his name on it, because the buildings Seo-jin owned did not have his name on them. Amara arrived at 6 p.m. in a navy suit Ji-woo's assistant had delivered to the Hanwoo that morning. It fit her the way clothes fit when someone has actually measured you. The office was not what she expected. She had expected marble, glass, intimidation. It was, instead, quiet. Warm wood floors, a wall of books, mostly in Korean, some in English, a few in what looked like French, a single low couch, a desk that was clearly used. On one corner of the desk was a small framed photograph of a young woman in a white doctor's coat, laughing. Seo-jin stood when she came in. He did not offer his hand. Koreans of his generation and station rarely did with women they respected. "Ms. Whitfield." "Mr. Yoon." She sat. "I've made my decision." "Tell me." She did. She walked him through option 3 the way Ji-woo had walked her through it, the way her mother had once walked her through long division at the kitchen table, patiently, one step at a time, so no one would ever be able to tell her later that she hadn't understood. When she was finished, Seo-jin was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I need you to understand something before we go further." "All right." "I am not a good man." His voice was steady. "I want to be clear with you about this, because you are about to accept help from me, and I do not want you to accept it under a misapprehension. I inherited a company from my father. My father built that company from a small trucking operation in the 1970s. He built it initially by moving things across borders that other men were afraid to move. Some of those things were legal, many were not. I inherited the legal parts and the illegal parts, and over the last 14 years I have worked very hard to separate them and to end the illegal parts. I am mostly, but not entirely, finished with that work." Amara looked at him. "Why are you telling me this?"
Because you deserve to know who is standing next to you before you decide to stand next to him. He met her eyes. There are 3 things I want you to understand. First, my resources are considerable, and I am placing a specific portion of them at your disposal, and I will not ask for anything in return. Not now, not later, not ever. If you succeed on Thursday and never speak to me again, that is a fine outcome. It is, in some ways, the outcome I expected when I sent the car to the river. Second, the men who work for me are, in the main, professionals. But there are some among them, and among my competitors, who will notice that a Black American woman is now visibly connected to my organization, however briefly. That visibility carries risk. I will assign 2 people to you. They will be discreet. They will not follow you into rooms. But they will be in the building. This is not negotiable if you are going to sit across a table from your husband on Thursday morning. His firm has done business with people I would not let near my sister, when I had a sister. Amara held his gaze. Third, he said, and here his voice softened, very slightly, in a way she had not heard yet. I want you to know that I am not doing this because I feel sorry for you. I am doing this because when my head of research briefed me on your file, he included, without my asking, a copy of a thesis you wrote at Georgetown on informal credit markets in West African diaspora communities in the American mid-Atlantic. I read it on a Sunday afternoon. It was very good. It was the work of a serious person. And I thought, this is a woman who has been made small by a small man, and I have the specific resources to correct the arithmetic. That is all this is. That is all I want it to be. Amara looked at the framed photograph on the desk. Your sister. Yes. She would be proud of you, Amara said quietly, for reading a stranger's thesis on a Sunday afternoon. Something moved across Seo-jin's face. It was very small. It was gone before it settled. Thank you, he said. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Amara said, I accept the terms, all 3, but I have one of my own. Please. When this is over, she said, when the money is recovered and the taxes are paid and the LLC is dead, I don't want you to introduce me to anyone. I don't want dinners. I don't want to be the American woman at the Yoon table. I want to build something, on my own, with what I already know how to do. If I ever come back to you, it will be because I have something to offer, not something to ask for. Seo-jin considered her for a long moment. Ms. Whitfield, he said, that is the term I was hoping you would set. He rose. She rose. At the door, she turned. Mr. Yoon. Yes? Thursday morning, she said. 9 a.m. I want him to see me walk in first, before the tax officers, before you. I want the first face he sees to be mine. Seo-jin inclined his head, 1 slow degree. It will be arranged. Thursday morning arrived the way certain mornings do, clear, cold, and organized around a single event. The conference room was on the 23rd floor of a building in Uedo that Darius's firm had leased for 11 years. Amara had been in that room exactly once, 3 years ago, at a company holiday party where Darius had introduced her to his boss as my wife. She used to work in something with numbers. She remembered the exact phrasing because she had written it down in her spreadsheet in the compliments column and then crossed it out. At 8:52 a.m. she walked in. She was wearing the navy suit. Her hair was pulled back in the low bun her mother had taught her to make when she was 13, and starting to understand that white teachers read her differently when her hair was contained. She carried a leather folder Ji-woo had given her, and inside the folder were 3 documents: a filed divorce petition, a notarized statement of cooperation with the Korean National Tax Service, and a cashier's check for $280,000, drawn on an escrow account Ji-woo had opened in Amara's name at 6 a.m. that morning, funded by an emergency retainer from her own firm against her projected settlement, the point of the check being not to pay it, but to prove she could. Darius was already in the room. He was standing at the window, on a call, his back to the door. He was wearing the gray suit she had bought him for his 30th birthday,
from a tailor in Itaewon she had researched for 6 weeks. He turned when he heard the door. His face did something complicated. Surprise, then annoyance. Then, when he saw the leather folder, the beginning of something else. "Amara, what are you—" "Sit down, Darius." He blinked. "Excuse me?" "Sit down," she said again, and she pulled out the chair at the head of the table, and she sat in it herself. He came slowly to the table. He did not sit at the head. He sat 2 chairs down on the side. "Whatever this is," he said, "I have a meeting in 7 minutes. So if you're here about the papers—" "I'm not signing the papers." She opened the folder. She slid the divorce petition across the polished walnut. "I filed this at 7 a.m. this morning in Seoul Family Court. On grounds of adultery, financial concealment, and fraudulent inducement into the prenuptial agreement. My attorney is Park Ji-woo. You may have heard of her firm." The color moved out of Darius's face in a specific order. First from his forehead, then his cheeks, then his mouth. "Amara, we can talk about this." "We are talking about this." She slid the second document across. "This is a notarized statement of cooperation with the National Tax Service. In approximately 4 minutes, 3 investigators are going to walk into this room. They have a warrant for your firm's records related to a Delaware LLC called Prescott Strategic Holdings. They have a second warrant for your personal accounts. They have a third for the accounts of a Ms. Song Chae-won, who I understand has been assisting you in restructuring certain assets over the past 8 months. His hand on the table began to shake very slightly. He put it in his lap. "You don't know what you're doing," he said. His voice had gone quiet. "You don't know who you're dealing with here. This firm has protection. There are people who—" "Yoon Seo-jin," Amara said. Darius stopped. For a long moment he did not move. He did not breathe. His face went through the specific transformation of a man realizing that the ground he has been standing on is not ground. "How do you know that name?" he whispered. "He sent a car for me on Tuesday night," Amara said. "After you called me nobody in the lobby of the Signal. I don't know if you remember. There were 42 witnesses. He was one of them, in a manner of speaking. He owns the Signal, Darius. He owns this building. He owns the firm you work for. He has owned all of it for 9 years. That's not— He owned Hana, too," she said softly, "in the sense that he was her brother." Darius made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound a man makes when the story he has been telling himself for a decade collapses in one sentence. "He was going to end you on Thursday morning regardless," Amara said. "That was going to happen. What changes today is that when the investigators come through that door, I am going to be sitting on the other side of the table from you, as a cooperating witness rather than as a co-defendant. And you are going to lose everything you have built, including the things you built by pretending they were mine." Before he could answer, the door opened. 3 men in dark suits came in, followed by a woman with a lanyard and a tablet, followed by Park Ji-woo, who nodded at Amara once and took the seat to her right. The lead investigator spoke in Korean. Ji-woo translated in a low voice for Amara, though Amara understood most of it. Search of premises, freeze on accounts, formal notice of investigation into tax evasion, corporate fraud, and, pending review, potential charges of criminal breach of trust. Darius sat with his hands in his lap. He did not look at Amara. At 9:14 a.m., they escorted him out of the conference room, not in handcuffs. That would come later, if at all. Just a firm hand at the elbow, and a woman with a lanyard walking 1 pace behind. When the door closed, Amara sat for a long moment in the empty chair at the head of the table. Then she opened the leather folder, took out a small notebook, and wrote, in her mother's careful handwriting, 9:14 a.m. Thursday. He didn't say my name. She closed the notebook. She was 31 years old. She was legally still married for the next 18 months. And she had $147 in her checking account, plus an escrow position she did not yet fully own. But for the first time since she had signed a piece of paper at 25, she was not disappearing. "If you are still with me right now, I want you to do something. I want you to think about the last time somebody made you disappear at their own table. And I want you to drop the word seen in the comments. Just that word. Because what happens to Amara next is what happens to a woman when she stops asking to be included in a room and starts building her own. The forensic accounting took 9 months, not 18.
It went faster because Darius, after the 3rd week of pre-trial detention, agreed to a cooperation deal of his own, one that involved returning a portion of the LLC's assets in exchange for a reduced sentence. The final settlement was signed on a Wednesday in September. Amara received $4,600,000 US, minus Jiwoo's fees, minus the tax obligations she was legally responsible for as a good-faith cooperator, minus a $200,000 contribution she made, unprompted, to the Yoon Hana Memorial Fund at Severance Hospital's Pediatric Oncology Unit. She did not send the contribution through Seo-jin. She sent it directly to the hospital in her own name, with a handwritten note in Korean that Jiwoo had helped her draft. It said, "For a young doctor I never met, from a woman who is still here because her brother stopped his car at a river." 2 days after the settlement, Darius asked, through his attorney, for a face-to-face meeting. Amara agreed to it on one condition. It would take place in the same conference room in Uedo at the same time of day, with Park Ji-woo present. He came in on a Thursday morning at 9 a.m. He had lost 15 pounds. His suit was one she did not recognize. His hair was cut shorter, in a style he would never have chosen for himself. He looked like a man who had spent 7 months learning what his life cost when nobody was subsidizing it. He sat this time without being told where. "Amara," he said. "Mr. Prescott." She did not smile. She did not scowl. She simply looked at him the way she had looked at him for 6 years without knowing she was looking, clearly. "I asked for this meeting," he said, "because I wanted to apologize, face to face. Before I leave for the States." "You're leaving?" "My visa's been revoked. I have 30 days. She nodded once. "I want to say," he said, and his voice cracked very slightly in a way she had once found endearing, "that I was wrong. About you, about us, about everything I said in that lobby. I was under a lot of pressure and Darius." He stopped. "I don't need your apology," she said. "I want you to hear that clearly. This is not a moment where you get to feel better about yourself. If you feel better after this meeting, we have failed. The point of this meeting on my end is for me to tell you 2 things. Then you can go." He nodded. "First," she said, "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, and not because you asked for it in a way that would have earned it. I forgive you because I am not going to spend the next 30 years of my life carrying a rock with your name on it. You are not important enough to me to be a rock. You are a lesson. I have learned the lesson. I do not need to keep the man." He was crying quietly in the way men cry when they are still trying to control it. She watched him do it without any particular feeling. "Second," she said, "you told me in that lobby that I was nobody without you. I want you to know something, because I think it will help you the next time you meet a woman and consider building a life on top of her. You were wrong, but not in the way you think. You did not make me somebody. I was already somebody. What you did was rent space in a house I built, and then set the house on fire and take credit for the smoke." She stood up. "That is all. Miss Park will see you out. My mother sends her regards. She said, and I am quoting, 'Tell that boy his mama raised him better than that, and I hope she's still alive to be disappointed in him.'" She walked out of the conference room, and she did not look back, and when the elevator doors closed behind her, she took her first full breath in 7 years. Downstairs in the lobby, Seo-jin was waiting. Not for her. He was apparently meeting his own attorney upstairs. But he was there. He saw her. He did not smile. He simply lifted his hand, palm up in the small gesture Koreans use when they mean, "I see you, and I will not embarrass you by saying so." She lifted hers back. 2 weeks after the meeting with Darius, Amara's mother called from Baltimore. "Baby," Denise said. Her voice was thick. "Baby, your Aunt Rosalind is here." "And she brought Darius's mama." Amara sat down on the couch of the small apartment she had rented in Seongsu-dong. a neighborhood she had chosen because it was full of independent bookstores and coffee roasters and had never once been chosen for her by a husband. She set her tea down. "Mama." They came to the house. They brought a peach cobbler, Amara. Rosalind brought her cobbler. Like this is a funeral. Darius's mama, Constance. She wants to talk to you. "About what?" "Baby," her mother said, and Amara heard the exhaustion in it, the particular exhaustion of a black woman being asked again to be the reasonable one. "She says he's not doing well over there in the States. She says he lost his job at the new firm. She says his father's health is failing. She says the family is—" "Mama, put her on the phone." There was a shuffling, a murmured exchange, and then a voice Amara had not heard in nearly a year. "Amara, sweetheart."
Constance Prescott had a voice like a garden. It was the first thing Amara had ever loved about Darius's family. The way his mother could make anything sound like she was inviting you into a room where the tea was already poured. "Constance." "Baby, I know this call is not what you wanted today. I know. And I'm not going to pretend I don't know what my son did. I know exactly what he did. Denise and I have been on the phone about it. And let me tell you, I have not raised my head in this church for 6 months, because I raised my son better than that. And God knows Constance knows I did. But, sweetheart, listen. He has learned. He has learned so much. And I am not asking for reconciliation. I am not. I would never. But Amara, honey, he's asking if you might. When you feel ready, consider signing a letter. Just a letter. To the Bar Association here in Maryland. Saying that the Korean charges were exaggerated. That there were cultural misunderstandings. Because if he can't get admitted to the bar, Constance, he cannot practice, and we have already spent— Constance, stop. There was a silence on the line so complete that Amara could hear a lawnmower in Baltimore. "Constance," she said softly, "I love you. I want to say that first because I mean it. You were kind to me."
"You made me feel welcome in your family when Darius was making sure I felt like I owed you all for being there. And I know you did not know what he was doing. I know that in my bones. So I'm going to say this to you the way I would say it to a woman I love. Yes, baby. I am not signing that letter." "Amara!" "I am not signing that letter, and I want you to understand why. Because if you don't, you and I are going to have the same conversation again in 6 months, and I don't have the strength for that. Your son did not misunderstand a culture. Your son ran a fraud on his wife for 6 years, and he was going to leave me with a tax bill that would have taken my mother's house. My mother, Denise. Who taught you how to make her sweet potato pie the year you got married? That woman was going to lose the house on North Fulton Avenue because of what your son did. Do you understand me?" Silence. "Yes," Constance said finally. "I understand you." "I am not the old Amara," she said. "I am not the girl who came to Sunday dinner and did the dishes, because I was afraid you wouldn't like me if I didn't. That girl was doing her best. I love her. I will not go back to being her. Not for you, not for him, not for the Maryland Bar Association, not for anybody. Do you hear me, Constance? I hear you, baby. Put my mama back on." The phone shuffled. Denise came back on. "Baby. Mama. You did good. I know. I'm gonna send Rosalind home with her cobbler. Constance can stay for coffee. She and I have some things to talk about that don't involve you." "Yes, ma'am." "Amara." "Yes, Mama. I'm proud of you. Your daddy would be proud of you. And Amara, you remember the coat?" "Yes, Mama." "The winter you were 13, and I sent you to school in that new down coat, and I wore the old one. You remember what you said to me that year, when you were 17 and you figured it out?" "I said I'd buy you a coat one day, Mama. A real one." "Baby," her mother said, and her voice was warm and old and unbreakable. "Buy me the coat." Amara bought her mother the coat 2 weeks later. It was a full-length wool coat from a maker in Milan, in a deep camel color that Denise Whitfield had once pointed to in a magazine when Amara was 15.
in the kind of gesture a mother makes when she has already decided she cannot afford the thing. But the coat was not the victory. The coat was the receipt. The victory was quieter, and it happened over the 14 months that followed. Amara took $2 million of her settlement and left the rest in low-yield instruments Jiwoo helped her structure. She did not buy a car. She did not buy an apartment. She rented the place in Seoul for 18 months on a modest lease. What she did instead was register a company. She called it Fulton and Whitfield Strategic. Fulton for the street she grew up on, Whitfield for her mother.
It was an advisory firm that helped small and mid-sized Korean companies enter African and African diaspora consumer markets, specifically in the American Mid-Atlantic, in West Africa, and in the Caribbean. She had been writing about these markets since her Georgetown thesis. She knew them the way people know the neighborhoods they grew up in. She started with one client, a Korean skincare company that had been trying, badly, to reach Black American women for 4 years. She restructured their entire strategy in a 6-week engagement. Their U.S. sales and the demographic tripled in the following quarter. The second client came from a referral. The third from a Bloomberg article the second client's founder wrote, unprompted, about her. By her 33rd birthday, Fulton and Whitfield Strategic had 6 full-time employees, an office in a walk-up above a coffee roaster in Gyeongsu-dong, and a client roster that included 2 mid-cap Korean firms she had once, as Darius's wife, served dinner to in her own home. Neither of them recognized her at first. Neither of them recognized her, and both of them hired her, which was, in some ways, the most instructive experience of her professional life. She did not go to Seo-jin for any of it. She did not ask him for a client. She did not use his name. She did not sit at his table. But on the morning she signed the lease for the office above the coffee roaster, she sent him a single text message. It said, "The house I built is open for business. A.W." He wrote back within the hour. It said, "Congratulations on your house. My office is available to you should you ever need to discuss the arithmetic. Y.S.J." She smiled at her phone for a long time. The other victory, the one she did not talk about at dinner parties, happened in a therapist's office in Itaewon on a Tuesday afternoon. She had been seeing Dr. Han for 11 months. On this particular Tuesday, Dr. Han asked her gently what she had learned about herself in the year since Thursday morning in Uedo. Amara sat for a long time. Then she said, "I learned that I was never nobody. I learned that when I was married, I was somebody who had been asked to fold herself very small, and I did it because I loved him, and because I thought love was folding. I learned that when a person tells you what you are for 6 years, some part of you starts to believe it, even the part of you that knows better. And I learned that the part of you that knows better is stronger than the part that believes, if you feed it every day. If you write down 4 kind things about yourself every night, the way I used to write down 4 kind things he said, that's the whole difference." Dr. Han was quiet. Then she said, "Amara, do you know what you just gave me? You just gave me the answer that most of my clients spend 3 years trying to reach." "I know," Amara said. "That's why I said it. I wanted you to know I've been paying attention." Amara did not see Yoon Seo-jin in person for 14 months after the morning she lifted her hand to him in the lobby. They exchanged occasional messages. He sent her a New Year card in Korean and English. She sent him a photograph of her mother in the camel coat, standing on the steps of the row house on North Fulton Avenue. He sent her a book on early Korean modernist poetry with a note that said, in his careful handwriting, "You mentioned once that you were teaching yourself the language. This poet is easier than she looks." She sent him back a note that said, "She looks like she should be difficult, and she is difficult. I am reading her anyway." He did not respond for 3 weeks. Then he sent one line, "I am glad you are reading her anyway." They met again on a Saturday in early spring at her invitation. She had opened a small gallery event for Fulton and Whitfield's 2nd anniversary, in the space above the coffee roaster. She had invited 70 people. She had included him on the list without ceremony, just his name on the guest list, no personal note. He came at 7:14 p.m. He was wearing a dark gray suit without a tie. He came alone. He stood in the corner for the first 40 minutes and talked to no one. She watched him between conversations without being obvious about it. He watched her without being obvious about it either. At 8 p.m., during a lull, she walked over. "Mr. Yoon, Ms. Whitfield, thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me. Your firm is impressive. I have heard about you from 3 separate people this month, none of whom knew we had met." "Good." She smiled small. "That's how I wanted it." He nodded. He looked, for the first time since she had met him, faintly uncertain. "Amara," he said. It was the first time he had used her given name. She noticed it. She did not comment on it. "Seo-jin." "I did not come tonight," he said carefully, "with any particular intention beyond congratulating you. I want to be very clear about that. Your terms 2 years ago were terms I respected. I have respected them. If tonight I have interpreted your invitation in a way you did not intend, I will leave, and there will be no consequence to that, and we will continue as we have been." She looked at him for a long moment. "Seo-jin," she said, "I invited 70 people to this event. I invited my accountant. I invited my landlord. I invited the woman who owns the coffee roaster downstairs. I did not invite you because you are one of 70 people to me. I invited you because I wanted you to see the house." He was quiet. "May I ask you a question?" he said. "Yes." "Are you asking me to stay tonight, or are you asking me to consider staying, in a broader sense?" She thought about it. She really thought about it. She had promised herself, at the river, that she would never again say yes to a thing because she thought she was supposed to. "I'm asking you to consider staying," she said, "if you can accept that the house is mine, and that I am not going to move into yours. Not now. Not ever, most likely. But there is a door in mine, and it is open, and it will remain open if you would like to come through it sometimes and read The Poet Who Is Difficult with me." Seo-jin looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "Amara, I would like that very much, and I would like to say something else, because I have wanted to say it for a year, and I have not said it because I did not want you to feel that anything I gave you was given in expectation of it." "Say it." "When I sent the car to the river," he said, "I did it because I thought I owed something to my sister. I did not do it for you. I want you to know that. But over the last 2 years, watching you build your firm, watching you write your mother, watching you refuse the letter for the Bar Association, which, yes, I know about, my apologies, I have come to believe that my sister sent me to the river, not the other way around. And I have come to believe that whatever I am now doing for you, I am doing for you, because you are the person you are, and not because of the person I lost. I wanted you to know this before I stayed for another minute." Amara felt her eyes fill. She did not blink them away. She let him see. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me that, for meaning it, for coming late enough that I got to spend the first 2 years alone." He nodded once. "Come," she said. "I want to introduce you to my accountant. She thinks you are a myth." Here is what Amara Whitfield learned. She learned that when a man tells you you are nobody, he is describing the size of the room he needs you to fit in, not the size of the person you are. She learned that the ones who tell you what you are worth are almost always the ones who have been benefiting from you not knowing. She learned that starting over does not begin with a plan. It begins with a stranger at a river, or a lawyer at a breakfast table, or a mother on the phone from Baltimore who tells you to buy the code. She learned that forgiveness is not something you give a person. It is something you give yourself, so you don't have to keep carrying them. She learned that love, the real kind, is not the kind that shows up at the river. Real love is what you build in the 2 years after the river, when you are alone, when you are figuring out what your own name sounds like in your own mouth. What comes after is welcome, if it is honest, and if it knows where the door is, and if it knocks. She did not get a fairy tale ending. Darius did not come back begging on his knees, and even if he had, she wouldn't have opened the door. Seo-jin did not sweep her into a palace, because she did not want a palace. She wanted an office above a coffee roaster in Seongsu-dong, and a mother in a camel coat on North Fulton Avenue,
and a firm with her own name on the door. She got something better than a fairy tale ending. She got herself back. If any part of Amara's story landed in your chest tonight, I want you to do 3 things. Drop a comment and tell me the one thing you are building right now that nobody gave you. Share this video with the woman in your life who needs to hear that starting over does not start with a plan, it starts with a decision. And subscribe, because next week we are telling the story of a woman in Atlanta whose mother-in-law tried to have her deported, and the federal judge who happened to be her law school classmate. She was already somebody. She always had been. She just had to stop asking permission to prove it. And so do you.